G'day and welcome to a very special edition to Mark My Words. I want to introduce my friend Paul. He's a gentleman that we have met kind of through the podcast. Yeah,
I
would
so.
say that.
Yeah.
Our wives work together,
They
our
do.
incredible wives. And what I've asked Paul to do is just come in and play podcast with me. Kind of add a little bit to Mark My Words. So I guess maybe it's Mark Our Words.
That's it. Today it is, yeah.
Today it is. So, Paul, a little bit about your diagnosis for people that don't know. And again, we're not going to go into this to your story per se today. But as you can see, the title of the episode is Diagnosis, Good or Bad. It's an interesting thing trying to get a diagnosis, isn't it, mate?
It really is, yeah. I've been through a plethora of diagnoses, but I've finally, in the last 4 years, kept the same diagnosis. So that's been quite interesting.
It's a funny thing because mental illness, we don't assume that it's something that's hard to diagnose, but of course it is. You walk into a doctor and say, I'm sad.
That's right.
And they're like, well, what does that mean? And you're like, well, it means I'm sad.
Yeah.
It's like we have to learn a whole new language to kind of help people understand what we're thinking and going through. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just going in there and saying I'm sad, then they want you to unpack some stuff that you're probably really not ready to.
Yeah.
Especially at our level. We can't just go into a random's doctor's office and just say, hey, all of this stuff in 15 minutes, we really can't do that. So I could imagine it'd be quite hard to diagnose.
I went to my doctor recently. I couldn't get my actual doctor. I had to get the substitute. And he was asking me about my PTSD medication.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I have this diagnosis. And he said, what is it from? And I said, well, it's abuse in the work, physical abuse in the workplace and a knife attack.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because his whole attitude changed after I said that.
Right.
He was like, oh, you've got the real kind of PTSD.
Right, okay.
Not
the real.
The real. I don't know that he said those words exactly, but that was definitely the vibe.
Yeah.
It was like challenging each and every medication.
Yeah, of course.
Until I said, oh, well, this is my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then he looked me up on the notes and kind of heard what I had to say. And then it completely changed the conversation around, the meds that you're on. Whereas, he was like, med number 1, Seroquel or something. What do you got? What do you need this for? What do you need this other one for?
Right,
what do you need this one
so
for?
Really unpacked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, even the people that are diagnosing us, it's like, it's such a personal interpretation.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Of course. Yeah.
So without going too deep and opening wounds, what's kind of been your journey with diagnosis? Because I understand that for many, many years you kept it so private that even your wife didn't know what was really going on.
That's right. We were 8 years into marriage before she found out much or anything. So
was she aware that you were a bit off at some stage?
She did, yes.
What was her point of view with this?
It was, I let her know that, I had a bit of depression, all that kind of stuff. And
it's impossible to hide that.
No, that's right. Yeah. And that's kind of what I played it off as, but I didn't actually know either what it was. So, during college, my mum noticed I wasn't very well. It went above the angsty teen, going to college is, whatever it is, he's just shutting himself into his room kind of thing. It went a bit further than that. So my mum just packed me in the car and we went to a doctor and he just chucked me on some antidepressants. Not sure what they were. He just said, at the time, especially at the time, and go take these, 2 pills a day, whatever it is. And that was it. And I kind of took a few and then stopped because it didn't work instantly. And I was just like, oh, well, he didn't tell me anything about anything. I don't know what is wrong with me.
And then what? You kind of just went into just got to tough it out mode.
And that's up until that point. I was probably 17 or 18. Up until that point, I was already toughing it out up until then. And then I thought, well, it's another few decades.
And that was the thing in our day, wasn't it? It was, a man sorts his own stuff out.
That's right,
He doesn't sook about it. He just gets on with it.
And it was embarrassing being in the doctor's surgery with my mum at 18 and then tearing up in the doctor's office.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to tell him or what to tell him.
Yeah.
And I didn't want my mum to know a lot of stuff. Yeah. So
how did things change in that diagnostic space? Where did you get to a point where you were like, I need to understand what's wrong with me?
So an event happened that caused PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got CPTSD, but then I've got a different diagnosis of PTSD on its own, from a different diagnosis completely, and a different incident completely. And I couldn't get back up after that. So it's just cut me off at the knees, and I could not recover. I went into shock once the paramedics turned up, but it was only shock at what I had witnessed and seen. And I just couldn't get back up. And 2-3 weeks later, I wasn't eating, I wasn't functioning, I wasn't working properly, I wasn't able to do anything. So my wife, took me to the doctors then.
Yeah.
And that's when we started, but we were already quite far in.
And I understand there was a few little difficulties with that communication thing that we mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
You weren't getting treated for what was really wrong with you because still you were holding things back.
That's right. Correct? And that was my own fault. So I went to a psychologist. She was lovely, but I think she saw straight through it. My BS, honestly.
Yeah.
She saw straight through it. And it was just, so she was asking me certain questions, certain things that happened. And she was like, look, it honestly sounds like PTSD. And I was just shocked. I was like, what do you mean? I had never thought of that kind of thing. I had the typical, hey, that's only a vet thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a vet. I'm not, but anyway, she said, it really sounds like that. You're saying this stuff never happened, or this stuff never happened, or this stuff never happened. And she's saying, are you sure this didn't happen? Because this really sounds like it happened, kind of thing. And I'm just there like, no, all good. Everything's fine. Like that really didn't happen.
It's like you were gaslighting yourself almost.
I was really self-sabotaging myself, was stopping myself getting any kind of treatment, and walked out of there on some kind of light medication again, I think. I think it was an antidepressant or something. Got home to my wife and said, hey, I've got, just anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. That was actually, quite a few years after the incident.
Yeah.
Is actually when I first started to see a psychologist as well. So,
well, what was the breakthrough with you? Did you ever get to the point where you were like, I've got to tell the whole story?
Yeah. Thankfully, my wife and I were lucky enough to have a GP that was fantastic, regular. He would just see it as a drop of a hat. He was there for my son's birth, everything like that. So we had him for a good 15 years. He only retired October last year, and it was just one of those moments that it felt like I lost a family member. I was just like, I just can't do it.
All the best doctors go away for some reason.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And if anyone deserved it, he absolutely did. But he found me the right help, and he was just like, no, something's off. So finally, and I think he was probably sick of seeing me in the doctor's surgery, he found me some help. So I went to a psychiatrist, and again, another bad experience. Not a bad experience because of him this time or them this time. Last time it was myself just holding back, but now I couldn't. So I started pouring stuff out to this doctor, and he said, you need to see this really good, what I've heard is a really good psychologist or psychiatrist, sorry. Go see them, and they'll hopefully sort you out. Back to me, eyes on a notepad, scribbling stuff down, asking me some questions, and then gave me a whole bunch of lithium to last me a lifetime and just said, you've got bipolar, get out. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, I can't have bipolar. Surely I don't. And
that's a massive diagnosis of one appointment as well.
One appointment. It was about half an hour. And again, he barely even looked at me. Told him certain things, and he kept repeating. He was like, oh, well, you've never had this, so that doesn't matter. And my wife and I were like, we just said that did happen.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, sorry, that did happen. So it was one of those kind of experiences. So so I got a bipolar diagnosis.
So how do you get past, clearly that was a negative experience for you. When was there a time when you were finally like, you know what, somebody's finally getting it? Or is that still in process?
No, that did absolutely happen. And again, it was my doctor, my very good doctor. So I saw that bipolar doctor, the one who gave me the bipolar diagnosis. I saw him a few more times, but it just wasn't getting any better. So I was just having repeated awful experiences, and I'd have to drive a long way to see them as well. They were out of town, so, and I was just sick of seeing it. So I got back. He said, "Okay, we'll see what else we can find." But my wife actually found an agency, an organization that actually helped, and I got in there, got assessed. Within a week or so, I was in there seeing a psychiatrist, and he moved completely to the opposite side of the room of his computer, sat down with a notebook, but looked me dead in the eyes and started speaking to me, and then stopping when I was speaking back. And he started really seeing things and hearing things, and that's, started trialing me on medications and different things. So that's when the trust came back, but that was only 3 years ago. So, and I'm 35 now, so it's taken a long time.
So 20 odd years, 25, 27
of pretty much nothing. Yeah.
Of nothing. So, all right. So I want to discuss this idea of around language. I've been to foreign countries where you show up and you can't speak the language. You things look familiar, things look the same. They feel like, it should make sense. But when you try and speak to somebody and it's something simple, like I would like to buy an ice cream or something like that, you would assume that you'd be able to just go point at the ice cream, point at your cash, point at yourself.
Yes, yeah.
But it doesn't work like that because communication is complex.
That's right.
How did you find that speaking to a therapist? Because my experience was something similar to what I'm trying to get my point across was when I first spoke to psychs.
Yes.
I didn't know their language.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I feel really sad. Now, for me to say that to anybody was a massive deal.
Yeah.
Even just admitting that I'm sad.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not to mention clinically depressed. And the doctors would look at you and go, well, what does that mean? And you'd look back and go, it means I'm sad.
Yeah, so you need to tell me. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I don't know what I am.
Yeah.
And then they start to go, oh, does it feel like this or does it feel like this? And then you start realizing that metaphors is such a massive part of making people understand your diagnosis. Yeah. Was that similar for you?
I think the language thing, if I'm talking specifically about what had happened, I barely make it through it. I can't really get too far into it without it just knocking me down. So my wife generally has to be there because she's almost my voice. So she would be there and say, look, this is the journey we've been through so far with doctors. So thankfully we do have that backing of history. And she can, say how many bad experiences we've had so far. And that seems to help because we've had that experience, and now she can get through to them. And then because of their back and forth, I can kind of gauge that language, and I kind of turn myself into that as well. So I can kind of change myself into being able to speak back. So, which is just something I've learned. Yeah.
I remember once there was a psychologist. He said, I want you to think of a safe place. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. What are you talking about? A safe place? She said, I want you to imagine somewhere, a place where you felt safe, a place that you really went to. And not understanding, I think, or maybe she did, I don't know, but this idea that mental illness doesn't just destroy your present because you can't have one, doesn't just destroy your future because the future, you don't have a future.
Yeah, that's right.
But it also affects and colors your past as well. So when you try and think of a place where you were safe and stuff like that, it's colored by your mental illness.
That's right. Yeah,
so And it took us months. For months, she was like, I want to know what your safe place is, where you felt you were safe. And she said, well, I had a dream one day, and I finally realized what my safe place was. And it was, I got swept out at Manly Beach. So I'm out behind Manly Beach. And I dropped off my surfboard and just duck dove.
Yeah.
And just the calmness, the light reflecting, the beautiful sand.
Yeah.
I said, that's my safe place.
Yeah, right.
And that's a safe memory for me. That's a pure memory.
Yeah.
And she tried to talk me out of it. Yeah, she's like, well, no, because you can't breathe. Yeah, it's like, well, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about how beautiful it
quiet
was.
And peaceful. Yeah.
Yeah. And just her, thankfully she folded it into whatever point she wanted to make.
Right.
But because breathing is such a big deal in psychology.
It is, yeah. Okay, yeah, you can't really inhale when you're down there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas to her, she didn't understand that in my memory, I could breathe down there and I could stay there as long as I want. And I felt the envelopment of the warm water.
Yeah,
and,
of course. Yeah.
So it was interesting to me that I had to struggle with her to make her understand what my safe place was.
Yeah.
That just comes down to me, that difference in language. Another one was when I said at work, I felt like I was Superman in that I was invulnerable.
You're right.
That nothing could hurt me.
Yes, yeah.
She thought I thought I was so great at the job that I was the best that had ever been. And that was not what I was saying at all. I was just saying that, I just felt invulnerable.
Yeah.
I felt like nothing could hurt me, even though it was.
Yes, yes.
So it's interesting how language plays into that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That whole diagnosis stuff. So you've got a story about being diagnosed, which is probably one of the worst I've ever heard. And I've heard a few.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody out there that has perhaps reached out for help and not gotten it and had that immediate reaction that you do? Because for me, when I had a doctor that was seeing me through return to work, what is that called? When they do the process.
The like gradual return to work program
all
or
that
something
sort
like
of stuff
that.
with whoever the organization was. And
they
were constantly trying to prove that I didn't have what I said I had.
Right.
And I went to see this psych and I had to fill out 150 questions.
Yeah.
And even that was like, I just,
by
about
150.
Yeah. By about 25, I'm like, I'm cooked.
Yeah.
But they were broken down into blocks of 5 questions. And the 5th question in every block was about alcohol and drug abuse.
Yeah, okay.
I don't drink.
Yep.
I don't take drugs except what's diagnosed for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So how often do you get drunk? Well, never.
Yeah.
And like, how often do I want to get drunk? Well, every single day, every single minute of every single day.
Yeah, yeah.
And he got back the survey and he said, well, you barely qualify as having borderline personality disorder.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And I said, well, what the hell was the test that you gave me?
Yeah.
And it was for alcohol and drug abuse.
Right.
It wasn't anything to do with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, right.
So I come out of that appointment and I'm just, it confirms everything that I think about myself. I am a liar. Right. I'm making this up.
Yeah.
I'm a wuss. I'm weak.
Yeah.
So we both had the experience where we walk out of a psych appointment absolutely devastated. What do you say to the person that may have called Lifeline and they didn't get the help they need, or they maybe went to their GP, or maybe like you went and through the whole process and went to see a psych and it just didn't work and they've given up on it?
Yeah,
what would you say to them?
Well, I'm actually helping a friend through it at the moment, and I'm trying to just tell her, had some bad experiences. And just like, no, I can't see that kind of person because of, my bad experience. And I'm like, nope, you have to. Just have to see the next one. Just keep going. Just keep calling. If you have a bad experience with Lifeline, call a different helpline and then call back, or call an ambulance, or call whoever you have to get that help. Don't wait decades, because with me now, it's fight or flight all the time. Every single second is quite painful. So it's just call back and hopefully you get a different one. Keep getting that help. Try to find that person that you trust. You find that doctor. Maybe it takes a few sessions, but give them a chance to not be that person first before giving up on them. Yeah.
What about the person that thinks that they're not worth it? Well, they've just gone, well, clearly I'm not helpable. I'm not worth it.
Well, look, unfortunately with myself, that's even what I feel now. And it's ridiculous. And I know it is because I am. My wife and son show me that I am. Or they prove to me that I am, or they help me see that I am. But those people, you are. I'm sure you are to somebody as well.
Yeah.
That should be enough.
A thought popped into my head, and it's a horrible thought, of going to your funeral. And I was like, I don't know that I could.
And I've thought of that. I've thought of others coming to my funeral, and I'm like, nope, that's just not a thought I can even consider. I need help now.
Yeah. My brother once said, if I do pass away, if I do take my own life, will you speak at my funeral?
Yeah.
And I said, mate, I don't know that I could.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could emotionally do that.
Say one word, yeah.
Just because it would be such a devastating consequence. And I think I'm like you in that I look at my kids, and when I had a really dark time just recently, I actually watched a stupid episode of, the Big Bang Theory.
Yes, yeah.
How they did the offshoot show, the Sheldon show.
Yes, yeah.
I was watching the Sheldon show when the dad dies in the final episode.
Right,
Sorry, spoiler alert.
Yep.
And Bruce Willis is dead in that film.
I was literally about to say that. You still get in trouble for that one.
So if you haven't seen the show, but watching Sheldon's struggle with trying to say what he felt,
that's horrendous.
And I was in tears, and it brought me back from the brink.
Right.
Thinking that, my kids.
That's what you'll be doing.
Would be what I'm doing to my kids. And you saw the devastation. The actor did an amazing job of just a heart attack.
Yes.
And you think, no, well, it's compounded if they chose
not to be there with you anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is absolutely not victim blaming. Of course it's not victim blaming, but it's a part of suicide that when you're in that dark tunnel, you can't really think about.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just that tunnel vision. And as you're saying, the dark tunnel, you really can't see out of it. And then at the end of your tunnel, thankfully, was Sheldon Cooper, and he brought you out of it by the sounds of it.
What a surprise.
That's right. Yeah. But no, like some of them are, I've thought of that many times, many times a week. And it's that I just fly on the wall at my own funeral. How awful.
Yeah. Because I don't know if you've ever been to a suicide funeral.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, they are the worst.
There's something different, yeah.
There really is. Like if somebody dies natural causes, an accident, something like that.
You generally still get a laugh. You generally still get something. People are telling funny stories at the end. People are doing whatever. But at this, no. Everyone just went home.
And the sad thing for me at the last funeral I went to for a suicide, they did not mention once that it was suicide.
Right, okay.
They alluded to it.
Right.
They kind of talked around it. But I kind of feel like it would have been helpful in that room to just say
the words, yeah.
Yeah, like we all feel robbed. Yeah. We all feel guilty.
Yeah.
What could I have done?
Of course, yeah.
What, and for me, with my mate that took his life a few years ago, I still have the thought, when did I speak to him last before he took his life?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's a ridiculous thing to think about.
Of course,
but it is. It's like, when did I last talk to him? When did I last think about it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it was a mate. It wasn't like an immediate family member, but you still carry around that guilt, that thought process. Yeah. All right. So coming from a man who's had more than enough bad experiences, please get help.
That's right. Yeah. Honestly, yeah. Myself and everyone just keep looking for the help, because it is there, and there are some diamonds in the rough there that are fantastic.
All right. Well, Paul, hopefully you're going to come back.
Absolutely.
I have loved this conversation. Let's keep it going. You can check us out on all your YouTubes and your Facebooks and your all them. Like, share, and subscribe. We will speak to you again next week.
Absolutely. We'll see you then.
See you later.
Bye.